And now you're seeing a little flip side of that. So the big companies, the successful ones, are going to find out, which I've known a long time. The bigger you are, the more the government's going to get inside what you do and want to impose on you and set rules and standards, and sometimes for good, and sometimes not for good. But so financial services, so I think technology is an absolutely wonderful thing. But financial services, first of all, we are a huge user of technology. We spend $9 billion a year. So we're not at the bleeding edge, but we're damn close in terms of what we spend money on, what we do, our data centers, our capabilities, our mobile, digital, moving. We move $6 trillion around the world every day, digitally, not cryptocurrency, but close to it because it's digital. And we bank 50 million people in our households, and soon we're going to have online investing and robo-investing, all these various things to link into our accounts. So we are huge users of that kind of stuff. We also obviously use the advertising of Facebook and Google, et cetera. But financial services is always going to be an interesting business because it's not the most important business, but it is at the nexus of how a capitalist society functions. It's part of the spin wheel. And when I say financial services, I'm talking about all of it. Private equity, venture capital, activists, whether you like them or not, banks, non-banks, individual investors. A lot of companies that do things individually that help change the world a little bit. But it's always going to be this field that where money gets invested, ideas come together, things get executed, capital gets executed globally. So it's always fascinating. It'll always be well paid. Whatever some of these folks say in D.C., it has to be well paid, but you can't do it with dumb people making dumb decisions if you're thinking to actually run a good economy or something like that. It'll always be a high-tech user, and it'll always be complex and global by its nature. And so it's a fascinating business. When you wake up in the morning, when I read the paper, there's very little in the paper that I'm not reading thinking about. It affects our clients, it affects our companies, it affects our risk, it affects our exposure. We should be doing something about it. Like just any article, because we do business in well over 100 countries, and with just about every country and every sovereign wealth fund. So it's a fascinating field. When you get into it, there are all different parts to it, and you got to decide how you want to, if you want to get into, how you want to get into that. One of the things we set up, which I really like, is we hired top-notch people for investment banking, and sales and trading. So we go to the best schools in the world. We hire some of the best people. We now do the same thing for general management, about 8 or 9 or 10 a year. Because we need people who can run the damn joint too. And I want the same quality, and we move them around the company, kind of keep an eye on them. And but the point is they want to be global, they want to move around, and they want to learn how to manage and run something. So the same kind of compensation as investment bankers, same openness to senior people so that we can get that. And not that if you're investment banking, you can't move into management or sales and trading, but this is really people who want to do more management and financial services.
So you mentioned cryptocurrency, and I know you said you weren't going to talk about Bitcoin anymore, but you're at Stanford. Some of us put all our student loan money into it, and I have to ask you anyway. Why do you believe that governments and regulators can't allow the existence of a global currency based on centralized risk?
I become like a spokesman against Bitcoin. I don't care. I don't care about Bitcoin. I could give a shit, to tell you the truth. And I promised myself I wouldn't talk about it. The next day, there are 4 things really quickly. Blockchain is real, it's technology, it can be public or private, it can be for 5 people, it can be for 5 million. It's going to work. You already use it in a lot of test cases, stuff like that, so we're a supporter. I do worry a little bit about the security, because like I said, we move $6 trillion a day, real time, quite efficiently, effectively, and secure. Before you replace that, you got to make sure you can do it right. There are 3 cryptocurrencies, 3 types, 3 separate types. One is ICOs. ICO, and I haven't studied these things, but you're paying for a token that allows you to use a service, which is very different than a currency, but that's what people call cryptocurrencies. And maybe, Jim, maybe you've studied some of these ICOs. I have no idea, about some will give you cloud services or some can give you investing services. That's one type. The second type, you can use cryptocurrency for fiat currency. Well, that works because it just uses a different technology to move money around. Basically keep your money digitally anyway, and if you just keep different files in a different way and distributed ledgers, that would work fine. But I've always thought about Bitcoin as a currency and a store of value and a payment mechanism, is that governments, and this is my belief, and I may be wrong, I'm not saying you can't go to $100,000, that governments are going to crush it one day for 3 reasons, One is when it's used for terrorist activities, It'll happen, it's a matter of time. Go back to a Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden the DOJ, the United States government, all these people in Washington who profess to love technology and novelty of Bitcoin are going to change their mind. Number two, when a lot of little old ladies lose their money, because the speculative vehicle was allowed to exist by the United States government, and they're going to lose their money and they're going to be pounding, you should have done something about it. And number three is the most important. Whenever a government forms itself and you go to any country in the world, pull out the currency, look at the date, that fiat currency was formed by that government with the central bank because governments like to control their currency. They like to know who has it, where it's going, why it's going, when it went, et cetera. And right now, Bitcoin's a novelty. It's $100 billion, and $1 billion a day trades hands. Obviously, mostly speculation. Okay, and obviously there's a real use case. I'm not making this a joke. Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, criminal, drug money, that'll always be true. So always have a use case that's valuable to someone because it's better in those countries to do something, to have that than to have currency or cash or money in a bank because the governments, they take that too. And if you go to Argentina, they had effectively savings accounts. The government just went in and took it. They just took it. And, of course, everyone took the money out of the bank right after that, and the country basically collapsed. But so that's the reason why. It's going to get bigger and bigger, and they're going to want to control it. And it's not the same as a fiat currency. A fiat currency, the government says, you must take this as legal tender. And at par, effectively, cash, at par. And it's always worth par. And I don't know why a crypto dollar would ever be something that, a store of value would be worse than a crypto Bitcoin. So that's my view, and I may be wrong, which I doubt. But I've been wrong before, though. So, and if I'm wrong, I also don't care very much. To tell the truth, it'll never affect my life. And it's not because they write, the bankers are defending their stuff. That's absolutely untrue. If Bitcoin works and we have to do something with Bitcoin, we'll do that too.
Kind of a win-win there.
Exactly.
JPMorgan's a big investor in blockchain technology, as distinct from Bitcoin. What do you think the most interesting applications of blockchain are going to be in finance?
Blockchain, think of it as it's not like a faster chip or the NVIDIA GPUs and stuff like that, because when you get certain technologies, they just filter through the whole system. And they allow you to do things differently everywhere, like just more database and more reading different natural language processing. You basically have to write code to have a use case for Bitcoin. So think of it as it'll be deployed use case by use case. We're using it to move money inside the bank. Something like 30 or 40% of the $6 trillion we move is just between JPMorgan Chase accounts. Okay? I saw Mary here, from General Motors to one of your vendors, and we have both the accounts. We just move it between our own accounts, basically. Loans, okay, a loan document, you do the trade, all the paperwork, all the detail, all the documentation, and all the covenants, and all that can be kept in a place where you all have the same files, they're all kept up to date. You know who owns it, you know who doesn't own it. So that'll be one. Equity trading, I don't know. The Bitcoin takes 10 minutes to finish. We do thousands and thousands of trades, split seconds in equities. So it may be too late to use for equity trading. It may be okay for end-of-day settlement stuff. So that's all, just use case by use case. You can go through one by one and say, it'll work here, it may not work there. But again, you got to kind of write the code, or effectively rewrite the code.
So we're going to move from one hot topic to another. You were part of President Trump's Business Advisory Board. Should it have been disbanded? And where is that dialogue with the administration now taking place?
Yeah, so I joined the council. Just keep in mind, so when I joined the council, the president asked, Steve Schwarzman called up actually and said, the president would like you to join this council. I am a patriot. I love the United States of America, okay? And you want to help your country, and I still am going to help my country. So help me God. That's what I'm going to do, whether or not you all like President Trump. And remember, we help presidents and prime ministers all around the world. I see them, we advise them, we give them this, and we want to help the people of that country too. And that is part of your job, is as a bank and as an individual, to try to help make the world a better place. I joined the council. I did get one very long, well-written, elegant, nasty letter from my daughter, like basically saying, how could you, Dad? And my other two daughters were right to the point, ditto. And my wife told me how many of her friends she had to explain it to. Remember, these are all liberal, effete New Yorkers, in my opinion. I said, I'm a patriot. Doesn't mean I agree with everything the man says or the way the man is himself. It's about trying to help the United States of America. The council met twice. So think of these councils. The truth is, they aren't particularly effective. I was at one. I don't know if Mary was at the second meeting. And I think the second was a lot like the first. You talk about the infrastructure, you talk about this, and the president is like, that's ridiculous, we get better at this. All true, but at one point, that work's got to be done in detail in the agencies. Okay, not by a bunch of CEOs sitting around the table, telling you that it takes too long to build a bridge and this regulation hurts and we need this in capital markets. So the effectiveness comes down over time. And then after, Charlottesville was the last straw, but the negatives were going up. Most of us really believe in diversity, LGBT, DACA programs. We're pro-immigrant. And we certainly wouldn't justify in any way, shape, or form, Nazism or white supremacy or stuff like that. So, we found ourselves having to explain to our own people, by the way, because the press was always calling me up and saying, you should say something. I don't remember the press calling me up and saying I have to go public every time I disagree with something Obama did. So the press really is extremely biased, and they're going to have to do something about it. Not all, they're all biased in their own way. But having to explain it constantly over and over was just a negative. We had a conference call. Steve Schwarzman was the chairman. He ran it. We went alphabetically. Everyone on the conference call said, let's just disband it. There were two who said, don't. Having to see the table is a good thing, et cetera, et cetera. And we disbanded it. Of course, Schwarzman told the president, and the thing that came out was that the president agreed to disband it, which wasn't exactly the case. But everyone in that room is still working with the people they should be working with to help the United States government do proper things. They need help.
It didn't happen. But say you wake up tomorrow as the secretary, what does tax reform or economic policy look like under Secretary Dimon?
Yeah, so I don't want to be Secretary of Treasury, but we have, I tell people this is important. This country has the best hand ever dealt of any country on the planet. And most people don't fully understand it because they never make the list. So I always say, when you have a problem, make a list and go through what really matters. And I'm going to do this quickly. We have all the food, water, and energy we need. We have the Atlantic and the Pacific, which our founding fathers realized how powerful it is to defend this country from wars in Asia, wars in Europe. We have the best military the world's ever seen. That's going to be true for a long period of time. I say compare this to China, but do it respectfully. China does not have enough food, water, and energy. Okay, and its neighbors happen to be Philippines, Japan, North Korea, South Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Russia. And they've had border skirmishes or wars with like 5 or 6 of those in the last 40 years. They are in a tough part of the world. So those leadership there, they're saying, God, we need food. We need access to certain commodities. We have to have an army just to protect ourselves from the billions of people that surround them that aren't necessarily that happy with them. So the United States also has, and I got out of business school, I talking about Japan, and then it was BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then it was Mexico, Mexico, Indonesia, South Africa, Turkey, but none of them have what I'm about to say. The universities we do, the rule of law like we do, low corruption like we do, the widest, deepest, most transparent financial markets the world's ever seen, public and private. Again, I'm not talking about banks here, okay? And hugely vibrant businesses, small to large, and innovation like the world's never seen. And I'm not talking about just Silicon Valley. I'm talking about you go to any company in America, and believe me, they're getting productivity up 2% somewhere, okay? And now, does Brazil have that? India, China? Okay, does most European countries have that whole list? Does Mexico have it? So people don't, that's the best hand. But something went wrong, and I do think we left behind a huge segment of society. 10 million people left the workforce, which I think they're starting to come back in. 20 million people are felons, of which a large amount shouldn't be felons. And I tell people, if you were all caught doing some of the shit you did, you'd be a felon too. And you can't get a job after that. Or at least, most companies, you're not going to get a job at JPMorgan by law for most of the jobs we by regulatory rules and requirements, okay? We have the opioid crisis. There are some, I think we blame trade and immigration and technology, but that's not really the reason, but we have some of these Rust Belt towns we left behind. Our inner city school kids, 50% don't graduate, okay? And most of you didn't go to inner city school, but 50% don't graduate. They're mostly poor, they're mostly minorities in this land of opportunity. There are 6 million open jobs today, good jobs, that you can get out of high school: welding, construction, electrical, coding, automotive. There are automotive jobs everywhere, aviation, and we're not training the kids. And so that's why, and that's also why I took on the chairman of the Business Roundtable. So the question I always have is, how do you fix that stuff? And in reality, I think the fix is actually known. I think the hard part is getting it through Congress. But competitive tax reform has to be done. It shocks me that my Democratic friends, they say, are you going to change wages on day one of the corporate tax reform? That's their measure. What happened last time? That's their measure. The measure you should have is the counterfactual. Had you had competitive tax system 10 years ago, there would have probably been $3 trillion retained here. Companies and capital. 5,000 companies have been bought by foreign companies because it's advantageous for them to own an American company now. So while our government dawdled on these inversions, 5,000 companies were acquired by foreign companies net. There's a study that came out by E&Y that would have been retained here. Think of corporate headquarters. And we damaged ourselves, and it's permanent. And that $4 trillion overseas, and it's $4 trillion. Some has been reinvested in hard equipment and plant and companies, but there's still $2.5 trillion in cash. That's why it's there. It's not because these companies are immoral, it's because it's so much more advantageous to do stuff over there. Microsoft built a research center in Vancouver because they can't hire the same kids in Seattle because of our immigration laws. And so, these things have held back America, and I am absolutely convinced, and it's hard to prove it because you can't put in a model, we're going to 2% in spite of the dumb things government's done for 10 years. And had we done the right things around competitive taxes, infrastructure, education, we'd be growing at 3% or more. This recovery, the growth is half of a normal recovery. A small business formation, we're down net millions of small companies that normally would have been formed, and the reason is lack of access to credit, regulations. And again, I can't prove it. I'm trying. We're using big data every now and trying to get some of the stuff looking backwards. And that's the part of the agenda of the Trump administration is the right stuff. Infrastructure, education, competitive tax reform, proper regulation. And I just say proper as opposed to less or more. They massively overdid it. You've heard people say that it didn't hold back lending, okay? And we did and this was real analysis and done by economists, not by me. Mortgages alone, we believe, are held back by $1 to $2 trillion because of the cost, lack of securitization, lack of servicing requirements, and because of litigation and stuff around it, that people are, mostly the mortgage underwriters, are unwilling to make mortgages to first-time buyers, young people, immigrants, prior defaults, and self-employed. Not going back to the subprime of the old age, just open up the credit box a little bit. Okay, $2 trillion of mortgages would have been probably 5% growth in GDP. That one thing. And yet they say it didn't hold back lending. And by that would have not changed any risk at all for banks. For the most part, we don't keep that stuff. And it wouldn't have changed the risk for the government actually, I think the risk is lower when the economy is stronger. And so that's what they should be doing. I think they are going to do some of that stuff, I hope.
Under your management, JPMorgan's gone from strength to strength, but one instance stands out as a negative during your tenure. So in 2012, a London-based trader lost over $6 billion for the bank. Are there any lessons for us all in how you dealt with that incident? And do you wish you'd done anything differently?
Here's an example. I mean, this is what our country's come to, okay? We had a record profit that year. We're a big company, hugely embarrassing. I'll tell you about that mistake in a second. No customers were involved. Okay, it was originally put on as a hedge that obviously didn't work. Okay, and yet we were punished severely in Congress, $2 billion of fines. I mean, it's outrageous. It's just outrageous that a company makes a mistake. My shareholders got hurt by $6 billion. I hurt my shareholders. I apologize to my shareholders, and the government fines me $2 billion in addition to that because they can, because they said it's another example of a bank being mismanaged, et cetera. Shit happens, and it was, we had put on a hedge that was supposed to earn a lot of money in a recession and basically break even in a normal thing and lose money in a booming environment. Think as we were short, high yield and long investment grade, something like that. And it wasn't the complex derivatives that mattered. Because the fact is that wasn't the mistake. The mistake was when we put this thing on, I thought, and I blame myself, and I went public right away, big mistake, $2 billion, could be a lot worse. Bad strategy, barely vetted, barely monitored, barely done. My fault. I'm sorry. We're going to fix it. The details in some ways didn't matter, but it was hugely liquid. This typical thing in trading, by the way. When we had asked them to reduce the positions in half, I had asked. I'd looked at some very simple numbers, risk-weighted assets. I should have asked a couple more questions. They couldn't do it. So instead of reducing it in half and saying, hey, we have a problem, but if they'd said that at that point in time, we'd have lost $500 million. You probably wouldn't even known about it. But instead of that, they kind of doubled down. They try to come up with these old cockamamie ways to reduce the risk, but they just added more and more liquid positions on top of other liquid positions. And when you try to unwind that thing, that's how you get killed. And so, but the lesson, there's no lesson to me. I knew the second it happened. I've seen it before. I got the whole management team together, all the PR people. I said, guys, they're going to come after us. They're going to say JPMorgan's like everybody else. You know, big banks are too big to manage. Jamie Dimon's a failure, just like these other guys. He's off his highly holy horse. Diamonds do break. Diamond in the rough. I wrote all the headlines. I said, forget all of that stuff. We're here to serve companies, serve clients. We're going to do our jobs, and hopefully the attack by the, and when something like that happens, and a lot of you have been through this, that is a letter to every AG, to every newspaper, to every senator, to every congressman, and they'll attack. Like literally like a bunch of barking hyenas. And yet we all look at it like that's okay. Well, it's not okay. It's not the way professionals, people should act when companies have problems and stuff like that. So, so the fact is, there was no great lesson learned, other than for all of you, whenever you have a problem, and I'd say now Zuckerberg's got one, that's what he's going to deal with. I'm not sure he completely understands that. Every AG, every senator, every congressman, they'll turn immediately, they'll go on the attack, they'll take advantage of it. I'm surprised they're not talking about fining them billions of dollars yet. And so, and that's what society is. You just have to learn how to deal with that stuff. So, and the biggest risk of all, the risk committee, so we obviously bear risk all around the world. That risk committee, which was meeting, had our senior risk officer on it. When I asked, what about this trade? They said, oh no, that trade was done pretty much between the bunch of those traders who were doing it and Ina Drew, who's our CIO, who I respect. They didn't want to share the risk committee. That should never happen, ever, 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 ever. Okay, our risk committee see everything. My general counsel sees everything. My head of compliance sees everything. Once someone ever says, well, that we're going to do over here, you got a problem. And that tends to create an issue that will come back and haunt you.
To explore leadership in tough situations some more, the Harvey Weinstein story is very much on people's minds at the moment. As a leader, what do you feel is your role to play in creating a work culture that's very respectful of women? Well,
the kids are right. The MDs, they come in, partners, and they're not thinking about it until Friday. And then Friday, they say, I need this, I need it Monday, which means you got to work all weekend. And most of the time, you could have gotten the assignment on Tuesday. And so we've actually tried to institute some policies like you can't give people assignments on Friday basically anymore unless it's approved by someone senior. But I worked all weekend, and then I show up at 9 o'clock, and it was a lot, I was in the library, basically doing research and stuff like that, and he wasn't there. And he called in at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. He said, Robin, I worked all weekend. You said 9 o'clock. It was critical. He said, oh, I didn't really need it until tomorrow. I just want to make sure you got it done. To which I was like, and I told him, I'll never work for you again. Now, this is not advice. Okay? My advice would be a temper is not a good thing. But and they said, well, if you can't tell the consulting firm who you're going to work for. I said, yes, I can, because they can fire me. I was quite serious. I never worked for the person again. And I think that was a bully thing, that was my instinct. That was just bullying me, and it was completely unnecessary. And he knew me well enough to know that I was going to get done what I told him I'd get done and stuff like that. You can have work-life balance. I tell people at JPMorgan Chase, it is your job to take care of your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, your friends, your family, your health. Your job. It's not our job. So I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding that some of the companies, now we should do everything we can to help you. And I tell people, we give you medical, shrinks, Pilates, massages. I mean, we really do try to take care of our people. But I can't make up for you not doing those other things, and you really have to do it yourself. Most people don't work very smart. So first off, work smart. Now, I deal with emails and phone calls generally once. Okay? I have 3 types of reading. Very fast, very slow. So the very slow is the complex. I really need to think about it. The very fast might be a magazine. I just want to see if they're interested in there or something like that. And people don't run their lives efficiently. And I'm sure you've seen even in school here, the people are frenzied. They're always frenzied. They're late. They can't get back. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. I couldn't get this done. I got my cases. I couldn't do this. If you're frenzied, it's you. It's not the school. It's not the job. It's you, because a lot of us aren't frenzied. I'm never late, almost never late. I'm not frenzied. I have a nice follow-up list. I know exactly what people are doing. I schedule time, for myself for exercise and for, making my phone calls. And if I didn't do it this morning, I would feel harried if I wasn't all caught up, So work really smart. Learn how to work smart. And then in parts of your life, I think it's really difficult when you have children. That does burn the candle at both ends. My advice to men is you better drop watching every football game and playing golf on both Saturday and Sunday. Do something with your kids. And if you don't, it's neglect. Okay, you call it whatever you want, but it's neglect. I have a lot of friends who complain about they have enough family time, but they go play golf on Saturday and Sunday. I'm playing golf on Saturday and Sunday means you wake up at 7 or 8, you go play golf for 3 hours, you have lunch, usually Bloody Mary, you go home and take a nap. Okay, and then you go to dinner with friends. You should have done something with your family. And so you can do it. And if you're a woman, I think it's even harder. And I think there's some jobs that are really conducive to helping you, and some aren't. And you got to think that through a little bit. And one of the greatest speeches I ever saw a woman give was, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at the same time. And just be a little thoughtful how you manage your life. That could be a man who's got to stay home to take care of kids or sick parents or something like that. And so it's a long race, and you can pretty much do it all. But you got to make sure you save time for yourself to do those things. And even the toughest job, you can do that.
Jamie, in 2014, you continued to actively lead JPMorgan despite battling and defeating throat cancer. Many people were incredibly impressed by your decision to stay at the helm of the company during that time. What continues to motivate you under those circumstances?
Well, yeah, remember, it's not up to me to stay at the helm of the company. And you're never quite over with cancer either. So, first I had to go public with it. It wasn't my preference, but I couldn't be seen walking in and out of Sloan Kettering, and of course I was going to lose weight, and I didn't lose my hair, but I could have, and all that. And so I just went completely clean. I did go to work like almost every day, but that does not mean I worked every day. I mean, I was taking 4 or 5 naps. I lost like 40 pounds. And I didn't want to get close to anyone because your immune system is virtually gone, so I didn't want to even get a cold at that point. But people say, why do you do it? So I was sitting home, and I go get my treatment every morning, radiation, and I go home. I would try to exercise. I went from running 5 miles to walking 5 to like literally walking for a minute, going on the floor because I was going to pass out, walking a minute. But it made me feel better. I spent the same amount in the gym. And then I'd go, but if I stayed at home, you know what I was doing? I couldn't read. I thought I could read 8 hours a day. I just couldn't do it. But I was staying home. I was watching ISIS and Ebola. And when I go to the office, I'm surrounded by friends and interesting things, and you catch your mind. I had some meetings, and so it just was better for me. And the board was fully briefed the whole time, and I have an unbelievable management team, and they were great, and my family is great, and so it was in some ways a heartwarming experience, other than the fact that it's terrifying.
Jamie, thank you so much. I think now we'll turn it over to the audience for Q&A.
Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Dimon. At what level do you think Bitcoin has to get to before JPMorgan would embrace it? And at what level of demand? You said there is a level, and I'm wondering what that would be as we look today at the price of $7,000 a
I
coin.
doubt we're going to embrace it at any price. So I mean, to me, it's that I'm worried about being caught up in this maelstrom of people losing money and stuff like that. There's no reason for us to do anything with Bitcoin. Now, if you're a client and you want, they're going to trade it on the CME or something like that, I advise you not to do it. But should we do it and put in trades for a client who asks us to, is sophisticated and obviously not bright, but sophisticated?